What if I told you that what happened to Fernando Alonso after the Bahrain 2026 tests is not a simple reliability problem, but a declaration of internal war against Aston Martin just before the Australian Grand Prix? Because what seemed like a complicated start to the season has transformed into something much more serious. Rumors of abandonment in Melbourne, tensions with Honda, and a message that many within the paddock already interpret as a direct warning from the Asturian. The question is clear. Is Alonso losing faith in the project that was to take him back to the fight for the title? It all starts in Bahrain, but not in the race, in the tests. That place where there are no points at stake, but there are uncomfortable truths. Where the stopwatches lie, but the data doesn't. And what the AMR 26 data showed was deeply worrying. We are not talking about a few tenths of disadvantage or a minor aerodynamic balance problem. We are talking about something much more delicate. The heart of the 2026 project, the Honda power unit, was not ready. Aston Martin accumulated one of the lowest mileage on the grid in the initial runs. But the problem was not just that they rolled little, but why they rolled little. When Fernando Alonso had to complete a key race simulation, that long run that defines engine maps, temperatures, energy consumption, and real reliability, the car was stopped by direct order after anomalies were detected in the power unit. That detail changes absolutely everything. Because when you can't finish a simulation in preseason, you're not fine-tuning performance. You're trying to understand if you can finish a race. Subsequent leaks spoke of abnormal vibrations that affected the hybrid system and the batteries, generating a structural risk for the mechanical assembly. It is not a superficial failure. It is not a hydraulic leak. It is a problem of deep integration between engine and chassis. And when that happens in year zero of a new regulation, the margin for reaction is dramatically reduced. Because every day lost in this phase is equivalent to weeks of disadvantage in real development. Internally, the atmosphere changed. The optimistic speech of the newy winter on the horizon, Honda committed to the maximum, Alonso leading the rebirth gave way to a much more contained tone. There is even talk of a crisis committee between Aston Martin and Honda to put out the fire before the first race arrives. And this is where Alonso comes in. Fernando is not a driver who needs superficial technical explanations. He understands perfectly what it means to abort a long simulation due to power unit problems. Understand what vibrations that compromise batteries entail. Understand that if in February you are already managing parts with supply tension, the start of the season can become a minefield. And he also understands something more important. That time in Formula One waits for no one. When rumors begin to circulate that Aston Martin might consider completing just a few laps in Australia to preserve components, the message is devastating. Because that is not sports strategy, it is technical survival. And for a pilot who has invested his final stage in this project, that sounds like a red alarm. Alonso's bomb is not an explosive headline. It's a posture. It's the silent pressure you exert when you make it clear that the project needs immediate answers. It is not a public attack, it is an internal warning. If the AMR 26 is born with doubts about structural reliability, the 2026 dream is in danger before it even officially starts. And at this point the conflict is raised. Is this crisis a simple youthful stumble of a new regulation? Or is it the symptom of a deeper problem that could mark the destiny of the Aston Martin Honda project from its first year? The problem is no longer just technical. The problem now is political, strategic, and above all, trust. Because when a project is born with the promise of being world champion and in its first major serious examination structural doubts appear, what is at stake is not a race. It is the complete credibility of the plan. After the Bahrain tests, Aston Martin stopped talking about performance and started talking about understanding, process, necessary steps before racing. This change in narrative is not coincidental. When you abort a race simulation due to a power unit problem, the focus is no longer on finding 2 tenths, it's on ensuring that the car survives 300 kilometers without self-destructing. And that, in the first year of a new regulation, is an extremely delicate signal. The vibrations that affect the hybrid architecture are not something that can be solved with an aerodynamic patch or a suspension adjustment. These are deep integration problems between the Honda engine and the chassis concept. And when that integration fails, the solution is not always immediate. Requires redesign, bench validation, new parts, new approvals. Time. And time is exactly what Alonso does not want to waste. This is where the figure of the Asturian acquires enormous weight within the team. Fernando is not only a pilot, it is the competitive axis of the project. His experience, his technical reading capacity, and his internal influence turn any gesture he makes into a message. And when versions begin to circulate about a possible minimal participation or even a strategic withdrawal in Australia to preserve components, the implicit message is clear. The situation is more serious than what is publicly acknowledged. Let's imagine the scenario from the inside. A manufacturer like Honda that returns with total ambition. A team like Aston Martin that has invested millions in infrastructure, wind tunnel, technical talent. And suddenly, before the first Grand Prix, there is talk of protecting engines because there are not enough guarantees of reliability. That's not just a mechanical problem. It is a direct hit to the winning project story. Alonso perfectly understands the psychological impact of that. In the paddock, perception is power. If your rivals smell weakness in the technical base, they attack. They redouble development. They press. And you go into reactive mode from the first race. That is why his bomb does not need inflammatory statements. All it takes is the visible tension, the internal demand, the calculated silence that makes it clear that you are not willing to accept a project halfway. In addition, there is an element that makes it even more sensitive. 2026 is not just another season. It is the year of the big regulatory change. The year where whoever gets it right from the beginning can dominate a complete cycle. If the AMR26 starts with vibration problems that compromise batteries and reliability, the risk is not losing Australia. It is losing the first entire year of competitive development. And then the big question that defines this act arises. Is Aston Martin prepared to react at the speed that Alonso demands? Because the Asturian does not want promises, he wants measurable solutions. He doesn't want speeches, he wants kilometers completed without failures. He doesn't want a narrative, he wants guarantees. If Australia becomes a weekend conditioned by mechanical preservation, tension will explode. If the car finishes the race without problems, there will be relief. But if reliability hits again, Alonso's message will no longer be implicit. And this is where everything converges. Because if Act 1 was the alarm bell in Bahrain and Act 2 was the internal tension silently growing, Act 3 is the moment of truth, Australia. The point where theories meet the runway. Where narrative becomes reality. If Aston Martin arrives in Melbourne with a car conditioned by mechanical preservation, the message will be unmistakable. It won't matter if they finish in the points or outside the top 10. What will matter is whether the AMR26 can complete a clean weekend without compromising the power unit. Because after what happened in the simulation tests aborted due to engine problems and structural doubts in the hybrid integration, the true rival will not be McLaren, nor Red Bull, nor Ferrari, it will be reliability. If Australia confirms the problems were just growing pains, the bomb is defused. The narrative changes. We will talk about quick reaction, technical capacity, resilience. But if the weekend turns into conservative management, if you have to lift your foot to protect components, if a mechanical shadow appears again, then Alonso's warning will no longer be implicit. Because what is at stake is not a race. It is the credibility of the Aston Martin Honda project since its birth. A new regulation defines complete cycles. He who starts weak pursues for years. And Alonso knows it better than anyone. He has experienced promising projects that were diluted by unstable technical bases. He doesn't want to repeat history. Because when Alonso throws a bomb, he does not seek to destroy. Seek to wake up. And if the project reacts, it can emerge stronger. But if he doesn't, the story of 2026 could begin marked by a doubt that will be impossible to ignore throughout the season. What has happened around Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin after the Bahrain 2026 tests is not a simple preseason episode exaggerated by media noise. It is an early warning at the most critical moment possible, the birth of a new regulatory cycle. The simulations aborted due to problems in the power unit, the vibrations that compromise the hybrid system, and the need to carefully manage the mileage are not minor details. They are signals that, in Formula One, set the course of an entire season. Alonso's bomb is not a break, it is not a confirmed withdrawal, it is not a slamming of the door. It is something deeper. It is a demand. It is a reminder that this project was sold as a total bet to fight for the championship from the beginning of the new regulations. And if the technical base does not respond, time does not wait. Each race conditioned by reliability not only costs points, it costs development, trust, and credibility. Australia thus becomes more than just the first race on the calendar. It is the real thermometer of the Aston Martin Honda project. If AMR26 responds, the crisis will remain a preseason scare. If you don't, the narrative will completely change and the internal pressure will increase exponentially. Because when the pilot leading your project perceives structural fragility, the reaction must be immediate and forceful. Ultimately, this story is not about abandonment. It's about trust. It's about whether Aston Martin can demonstrate that the 2026 project is solid from the ground up. It's about whether Honda can rise to the challenge. And it's about whether Fernando Alonso continues to believe that this is the place where he can fight for the best again. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.